Today, I want to welcome Mitch Carson. Mitch comes from fabulous Las Vegas, and he has his own TV show there on NBC3. He's also had shows on CNN. And what Mitch does for folks is he gets them interviewed on TV. That's his gig. And he comes from a long history of doing that. He works with speakers and authors in particular. And the reason I invited him on Leaders and Legacies is I there are very few businesses, unless you're a rare individual, you probably don't have enough PR. You probably don't have enough exposure. And this is the thing that Mitch helps with that. And so listen up, because whatever PR you have, it's not enough. Guarantee it. And so Mitch is going to walk us down that path. Mitch, welcome to Leaders and Legacies.
Thanks for having me, Craig. I'm delighted to be here, truly, because I know you gave a great interview to a lot of other people, and I wanted to be part of your network. Thank you.
Oh, well, thank you. And I've really been looking forward to it. So how'd you get into TV? What's the background there?
Yeah, the story is I was a pitchman on a channel called Home Shopping Network in the 90s. I did that for about 3 years, where I pitched products on live television with an audience of about 5 million people. I refer to that as the Super Bowl of selling, because if you don't sell well, you're fired. Long before The Apprentice came along with Donald Trump. Way before he became President Trump, he was just known as the Donald. And back then, I was realizing how effective I was selling something immediately. Within the second, how many, because you get a role on the television channel, and I'm getting in my ear, you better sell or you're fired. Not exactly, but you get the point when I'm done with this segment. And television is a one-to-many platform. Something I learned early on as a professional speaker of almost 40 years now. I left the one-to-one selling because that's hard work. And when I saw other people selling from the stage and selling one-to-many, I said, I want to be able to do that. And in the beginning, I sucked. And then I became slowly better. So I look at speaking to one is a good practice portion, and selling on TV was the ultimate, where I was selling 1 to 5 million. Ladies, largely, let's just say women, and I don't mean to be sexist, but let's just say most of my demographic were women who were stay-at-home moms or housewives, which is great. They were the audience. They were there during the middle of the day, and they were the ones that were buying the products because they were the home supervisors, if you will. And that's where consumer products were sold. And I just found the power of television, of exposure.
I think that's where Mike Grove got his start, the Dirty Jobs guy. It was selling on Home Shopping Network.
I wasn't familiar with him. I'm going back. I did that between 1996 and 98.
Yeah.
I hung up my spurs after that, not being a Texan.
I think my only television appearance was, I was probably 4 or 5 years old, and my mom was on some community television show in my backwater town on the Eastern Shore of Maryland. And I walked up to her and I whispered, in my mind, I was whispering in her ear. It turns out I was speaking straight into her lavalier mic. I said, I need to pee. And
oh, so boy.
They haven't let me back on TV since.
Oh, my gosh. Well, you just took the piss out of me. That's funny.
Well, and there's got to be a story out there. I mean, in all your time on TV, there has to be some just bizarre, outrageous story that's just too hard to believe is true, but it happened.
Oh, there are a few. And I'll just share the very first time. I'll expose my warts here. I've gotten to where I think I'm pretty good at what I do because I enjoy it, passionate about it, and I've learned from my mistakes, a lot of mistakes. I failed a lot in the beginning. The very first time I sold on Home Shopping Network, I went into the bathroom and threw up. Now, my outward appearance is this well-spoken, confident guy in shape, but inside I was this little boy that got sick to his stomach, had just swallowed a frog and needed to get it out. And I went in the bathroom and it was all bottled up nerves because I had this belief 5 million people. I kept playing on the number as opposed to the camera. It took a while for me to overcome that. Second time I went on the air, because you do 4 airings in a row when they test you. And I did another airing in the middle of the night. So I did the second airing, same thing, dry heaving, sick. Third time, I nailed it. So I had to go through this pain in order to reach a level of satisfaction and pleasure. You know, they're polar opposites, pain or pleasure. So we're motivated by that. So I went through enough pain to where I was willing to go through it in order to realize some pleasure, which means I made money, I became profitable, and I got invited back to do more and more segments. So it was a painful process to get through that. I mean, much like getting off training wheels on a bicycle. You fall down a few times, maybe chin, and I've got the scar to prove it from when I fell as a 5-year-old. And you just go through these stories. I mean, you go through these events in life and you either endure or you don't. You get punched in the nose. Do you get up or do you run off into a corner?
Yeah, and when I'm thinking about the people that are listening, there are those that have never, met a TV camera they didn't love, and
Of
they've probably
course.
already tuned out, because they're like, got this covered. But there's a lot of people out there, some that think, that they're like you, that they're just scared. Yeah, it's like,
Sure.
oh, I don't want to go. That's a terrifying environment. I don't want to do it. And there are other people that are just like, oh, I'm just not the best representative for my brand. Somebody else should get in front of TV.
Of course.
So let's take those. Let's start with, we're talking about being terrified. Let's start there. Well, actually, let me back up a bit and just kind of hammer home. You said earlier, if you want to sell a lot, being on stage, being in front of a camera, selling to many at once is a way to drive volume. Where do you see this applying? Who would you advise that, TV is not your thing? Is there such a thing?
All right. There are a couple different mediums. Let's talk about the medium we're using now, podcasts. We're going through this. This is one to many presenting. Whether they choose to buy based on the message we're offering today or communicating is up to the individual. But if we went through this one-to-one, oh my gosh, is that tiring? I mean, I don't know how many downloads and listens you're going to have on this. It's irrelevant, but to support the point, even I had a year-long show on CBS radio in LA. And I had about 40 to 50,000 listeners every Saturday. It's one-to-many selling. Are they tuning in exactly to my show? Are they listening to every minute of the 37 minutes because the rest of the hour is filled with national advertising because it was CBS radio? No, but at the right amount, that's why you repeat the call to action multiple times. You say, call this number, do this, and you throw a lot of BBs out of your gun and a buckshot. Some of them are going to stick. It's always better to be precise. You hear about, oh, you got to find the right message to the right market. All true. But if you're in the right market, it's a matter of, this is what I've learned over my years in marketing and selling. Sometimes you can be the greatest salesperson, but people will buy when they want to buy. And it's also an issue of timing.
Mm-hmm.
They may not be ready to buy, but if you've done a great job and not pushed them and have left a positive impression with these people, there might be unknown issues that they're not willing to disclose to you. Nobody, oh, you didn't give enough value in your presentation. You obviously didn't overcome their objections properly. Sometimes you just don't know their objections. So when you splatter a lot of paint, it's going to stick and drip. You just don't know where it's all going to come to a head. I mean, you can overanalyze this until the cows come home. But the truth is, you have to be consistent. You have to be consistent and keep communicating your value, giving away maybe some limited free information. When you talk about PR, pardon the segue, but people ask me, how often should I use PR? Forever.
Right. Yeah.
forever. You don't ever stop. If you do something that works, why would you stop?
Yeah.
Why change a winning lineup if it's working? That it works. I mean, we've got the sports metaphors. Oh yeah, we won this. We won the World Series. Let's try this rookie pitcher next time in the World Series. He's unproven, but let's just try it, or let's just not play it all. We've already won one. What?
Well, and one of the things I've found, and you actually mentioned this earlier, you were talking about being when you were on the Home Shopping Network,
Mhm.
you had the voice in the ear saying you better start moving the needle. You're
Right.
getting
Immediate.
live feedback on what's landing. And I found for me, when I started guesting on podcasts, I guested on a bunch of podcasts before I ever launched my own.
Right.
And what I found was the way I delivered the message started evolving because when I was interacting with somebody, I would say something and I would see how it would land. And then the next time I'd say it a little bit differently and I'd see that it would land differently. And it gave me a chance to refine my message. And so,
Totally agree.
and so even if you don't care about the mass audience, the benefit of getting out and talking about your whatever it is you sell, you do it better with more practice where you get live feedback.
100%. And fail a lot, because when you get to the level of excellence, every excellent person I know, whatever the craft or business or sector, has failed a lot. They're willing to expose themselves and learn, just like you're saying, your messages improve over time. You guested before you hosted. I don't know if you still guest or not, but you learn to craft and hone your message more precisely and more on target. You
Yeah.
go from buckshot to a laser focused single shot in many cases.
Well, no, and I still guessed, but I'm not guesting enough. And
Okay.
and so that's something I need to do. That's an action for me from this podcast. Greg, go get booked on some more podcasts because it's important. So what about the people who are just terrified? Let's address them because there's some people that are like, isn't there some stat, and I hate to sound cliche, but isn't there some stat that people fear speaking in public more than they fear going to the dentist or something like that?
They fear it more than burning in a fire or drowning.
Wow.
Yes, and that is, yeah, they call it glossophobia, which is the fear of speaking in front of a crowd. It's the embarrassment. And when I spoke in front of a crowd, I remember as a little boy, I was quite introverted, shy, scared, and it was embarrassing to me because people were laughing and I thought they were laughing about me, and it could have been laughing about something else. Who knows? But it is a real fear. I no longer carry that fear. And a lot of my programs I have taught over the years, workshops, have been on public speaking, how to connect and profit from a room of people. I learned that skill over time after failing a lot. It is the number one fear. So how does somebody overcome it in order to reach the highest level, which is live television? Live television is the ultimate. That's the Harvard
Yeah.
of broadcasting in New York City. Let's just call it New York is the ultimate market. It's the biggest market in the world for media, and it's the most sought after. How do you get there? Different levels. I remember when I had my radio show, this lady came in who was a knockout. She was my friend's wife. She was a 5'10" blonde, former Ford model. Absolute knockout. When she walked into the studio, people just, confident and gorgeous. Sat down at the microphone. There were 4 mics in the studio. Engineering was over on the other side of the glass. And my caller, the person who managed the incoming calls for the show, was in another room. She sat down, and I had 2 other seats there. She came in. She was our guest. It was a mortgage show. And we were talking about real estate in high-end neighborhoods. She walks in, sits down, and I said, blank, are you ready? I don't want to say her name. I said, are you ready? Because we had talked about it over the phone before she came into the studio. She looked at the light that said on air, and it was blinking, meaning it was about to go live. When it went live, she saw that, and I saw this statuesque, gorgeous woman, confident, turn into a 6-year-old child who wanted to get under her mother's dress, hide under the skirt. She just wilted. You remember the Wicked Witch of the West in Wizard of Oz. I'm melting. I'm melting. That's what happened to this woman, Craig. She just melted and imploded. And she started shaking uncontrollably and crying. I had to mute her mic and take over the interview. She wasn't prepared. So that is one step where you just don't know. You got to prepare people for media.
So how do you overcome that fear? I mean, because
start small.
Start small.
Start small. For example, and this is what I walk people through. There are a couple ways to do it. You know, like in my speaking training, and I also, for people that are fearful when they get on, nobody fails on my watch when they get on live TV because my reputation's at stake.
Yeah.
I will be blackballed from studios if someone did that inside a live television show. All of them go through media training before I release them to the media. And the way that you step with this is first start out, if they have no experience, is on a recorded show. One of the CW records before they air, before it goes live. So you can screw up. And if you're able to do and perform well there, then you can go on live TV, which is ABC and CBS, which are the lives, and Fox here in Las Vegas. Those are the 3 of the 5 networks that are live. The CW and NBC are recorded and then broadcast maybe the next day or a few hours later, or depends on the slotting. But I think if someone has no experience, and we go through this before someone is able to air live, I got to test them, and they got to be vetted. Because I go back to when I was on live TV with 5 million viewers, this is 40,000.
Right.
A lot different. And you're in studio and there are multi-million-dollar cameras, you know, that are around. I mean, some of the studios have 6 or 7 cameras. When I shot a live TV show in Manila last year, it was a live audience. We had 60 people in the audience, and I had former Miss Universe interviewing me inside the studio. So I wasn't going to screw up. I'm very experienced at this point. But had I been dropped into that environment years ago, and I had this absolute true 10 sitting across from me, interviewing me, and a live audience, there's no room for error. And in order to get there, it took a lot of practice.
You know, one of the things I see in these interviews that we do is I'll have the most amazing conversation with somebody in the green room.
Mm-hmm.
And as soon as we hit record, it's like a new person showed up.
Right.
And they're just sitting there, they're reading scripts. You know, they've got their scripts that they're just delivering. And, you know, and it's tough because, you know, we're recording and I just want to go back and say, be the person you were in the green room.
I know. I hope I'm consistent.
No, you totally are. You totally are. But I guess one of the reasons I'm bringing that up is I think people come and they're like, well, I need to show up and I need to deliver precisely the right lines. I need to be perfect.
No, you practice and then you go with the flow. Because if you sound rehearsed, you will sound rehearsed. If you rehearse to a degree and then you allow the free flow, like we had questions before we were doing this interview. I said, I think this is an organic interview and it sounds much more natural. You and I were 2 smart guys just having a conversation.
Yeah.
And going through this. You may have some templates to work from, a little bit of background. We all do as hosts. I host my show and I have questions that I ask for from my guests. It's to make them feel comfortable. I know how to carry a conversation as you do. You're doing exactly what a professional does. You have to have some baseline. So it's questions are there not to be read one after the other. So question numbers, you sound like a robot. Are you Chat GPT or are you a human Craig Andrews? I hope to God you're not Chat GPT. All right. It's useful, but it's just a tool. I'm sure you've been interviewed by robots. So have I. And I want to unplug them.
I've had a couple interviews. I think the most bizarre one was he did exactly what you're talking about. Okay, the first question is, how do you answer this? And I answered the question. All right, the next question.
Oh,
And
gosh.
we do that for 15 minutes. And then all of a sudden, he just closes Zoom. I'm like, oh my goodness, his computer just crashed. And so I emailed him. I said, hey, did your computer crash? Is everything okay? He's like, no, the interview was over. And I was
Oh
like,
my gosh.
it was
I
so,
had that too. I had that one like that also.
and it's, I just, my neighbor, I didn't mention this to you, but I live on one side of Michael Dell, the computer guy. I live on one
Oh,
side of his ranch. Joe Rogan lives on the other side of the ranch.
oh, I didn't
And
know that he's in Texas. I thought he was in LA.
nah, no, he moved out here in 2020, kind of at the beginning of COVID.
Okay.
And so he's like 13 minutes from my house. In 14 minutes, his security could be pulling me off the gate, as I'm trying to climb
Right.
and get an interview with him.
Sure,
Um,
sure.
but you look at his style and it's just a conversation. One of the reasons he does 3 hours, and he's said this, is it takes that long for him to get people to relax and really start getting into the meat of things. And that's been his formula for success. And I don't know if I know all I don't know if I know the answer for success, but I know that coming on and reading scripts or reciting scripts does not connect with people.
No. No, he's raw. That's why he's the number one podcaster in the world. And he's a likable guy. He's unassuming. He looks like a fire plug. I met him in person once at the Comedy Store in Los Angeles. He had a set. He came in. He was great as a comedian, and he
Yeah.
got off and he walked by me and said, "Hey, what's up?" And I don't know why he singled me out. Maybe just saw him or we're connected, but he was a very stout guy, and he
Yeah.
is a true martial artist as well.
Yeah. Yeah. He's an interesting fella.
Yeah.
Let's talk about another group of people. I want to make sure we get this in before we run out of time. And, for those that are listening, we have a commonality that we both sat under Roy H. Williams, who's a, marketing genius.
Yes.
And one thing that I've seen in all of Roy's ads, Roy does mostly radio ads, but every single ad I can think of, the owner of the business is voicing the ad.
Ah.
And I think there are a lot of people, some of the objections that are thrown out is like, hey, no, I'm not the best spokesman for my brand. I'm not somebody else should be. Maybe we should hire an actor, just not me. What would you say to those people?
The ones that want to deflect it, if they are truly incapable, an actor has its place, like a spokesperson. For Robert Wagner used to be a spokesperson for a lot of products for infomercials. And
Mhm.
it's that celebrity endorsement to elevate it. If it's a small business, which Roy worked with a lot of those, and he worked with national brands as well, advising them. From my understanding, you may know better than me, Craig. I don't know. But I know Roy was brilliant at writing these ads and jingles and creating all that so it locks in the memory. To have the owner, of course, is powerful because that's the implied endorsement. And if they're imperfect on camera or imperfect on the mic because it's radio, I think that's okay. That humanizes the person to connect with the listeners because listening is the highest retention over video. Video is great. People watch it, but they switch away. People listen and lean in. And I think it is valuable to have the proprietor or founder of the business as the voice of the business.
Yeah.
So
Well,
I would say, unless they have an annoying, squeaky voice that sounds like nails on a chalkboard, that would be the exception. And I'm sure Roy would be forthright and advise them. You may want to have a spokesperson.
he's actually used that. He's used that strategically. He and then he had a client, Spence Diamonds. And
Oh,
so if you stayed at the academy, you may have walked by Spence Manor or stayed at Spence Manor.
he worked with a couple jewelers, I know.
Yeah. And one of the things he told Sean, he said, Sean, you have a now I'm getting the Roy version. I'm sure it came across a little bit differently when he presented it to Sean. And he said, Sean, you have a whiny little voice and it intimidates no one. A jewelry store is one of the most intimidating places in the world. You're going
Yes.
in to buy a diamond ring. He said, we're going to use your squeaky little voice to remove the fear factor from your future customers. And so he featured him in the ads, and every ad with Sean Jones ended with this weird little scream. And the internet would light up. I mean, there were people that devoted entire blog articles to how bad those ads were as Sean started raking in more and more money.
Oh, that's wonderful. Wonderful story. So Roy is brilliant. I mean, we agree on that. The guy in his niche, there's no better.
Yeah. But I think so. Let's end here. For people that are looking to get PR and they're just looking at this massive uphill view of, okay, Mitch is telling me I need to be on TV. I have no experience. That seems intimidating. I don't know. What are the next steps they should start taking? How do they get from here to there?
If they've never been on a podcast, never been on the radio, it may make sense to start with radio. It may make, I mean, I also provide live radio here in Vegas. Oftentimes that's worked into the whole package where I cover it all in 2 days, 4 networks, a radio show, but it's all done by practice beforehand. Nobody goes without preparation. Nobody goes live without being vetted. And podcasting, the medium we're working on, in most cases, it's recorded and then you can edit later. It's a great way to start your PR experience. Cut your teeth on podcasting. Cut your teeth on recorded delivery before you go live. Your confidence will build up. You'll clarify and narrow down your message. You'll be more effective because television is 2.5 to 4 minutes, the segments. You better be on point. You speak in sound bites. You get rid of any of these verbal tics called, yeah, right. I hate it when people end sentences with right. None of that is allowed on Mitch's watch. You get rid of the you knows, right, or like, when they put like in every sentence. No. You're not speaking like a teenager. Be a professional. Stop saying right. Stop saying like, and you know. No, I don't know. You're telling me. Be on point. Be on point. Speak in sound bites. Answer the questions there. We have much greater latitude in a longer radio show interview, which is typically 15 minutes, or in a podcast, which is 20, maybe 25 minutes max in most cases. I'm generalizing. You have a little more flexibility, but television is the ultimate platform. Live TV, you better be prepared.
That is great advice. So your business is get interviewed guaranteed. You get people on TV and you get them there so that they're ready to perform. How do people reach you?
Getinterviewedguaranteed.com/meet with Mitch. If you are interested and believe this is something you want to launch your publicity, reach out to me and set up an appointment. That's where you'll see my calendar. We'll set up a time. If you just want to talk about sports, please don't call me. If you want to get serious about your business and grow, if you are a speaker or an author, that's typically my market. Some CEOs want that also. getinterviewedguaranteed.com/meet with Mitch.
Well, Mitch, thanks for sharing that on Leaders and Legacies.
Thank you for having me, Craig. I appreciate